Here's a strange thing about voices. They often hang around. Have you noticed that? Long after you and I heard the voices, they stay. They stay in our heads, and yes, they stay in our hearts. Voices are good at lingering, and sometimes they'll linger for years. Here's what I mean. When I was 16 years old, I went to a basketball camp at Indiana University, and at the time, man, they had one of the best men's basketball programs in the country. Some of you remember those days. And the coach there was a guy, crazy guy in my opinion, great coach, by the name of Bobby Knight. Now, he was loud, he was intense, and the reference to crazy, if you don't believe me, Google when you get home today, Bobby Knight throws chair across the floor during a game. He did that one time. But that's not really that relevant here, but I had to mention it. So about 200 of us were sitting at one of the sessions at this camp one day. We're sitting in the bleachers, listening to one of the instructors, and all of a sudden, in walks Bobby Knight. Oh my gosh. And he walked right over to us, and he looked at us, and then I remember he noticed some basketballs sitting on the other side of the gym, and then he looked at a kid sitting right in front of me in the front row of the bleachers, and he said, "Son, go get me one of those basketballs." Said it just like that. Well, what would you do? Of course, that kid stood up, and he jogged over, picked up a basketball, came back, gave it to Bobby Knight. So then Bobby Knight looked at this kid, and he said, "Okay, son, we're going to do this again, only this time." And when he said that, the real Bobby Knight appeared. He said, "Son, don't ever let me see you loaf in this gym again. This is Indiana University, son. This is real basketball. This isn't kindergarten." Well, needless to say, that kid went through years of therapy after that. No, needless to say, that kid sprinted faster than he'd ever moved before in his life, probably ever moved again. He grabbed another basketball, came back, gave it to Bobby Knight, and Bobby Knight turns and looks at the 200 of us. We're sitting in the bleachers all looking like this. And he said to us, "Gentlemen, what you just witnessed was the power of motivation." Now that was a day, believe me, when the loudest voice in the room won. And the voice that I heard that day when I was only 16 was a driving voice. Choosing to use these three voices will help me to find greater peace and greater reconciliation in any relationship in my life. I mean any relationship, and also in your life, and will keep us aligned with what Jesus would have us do. Now, get a mental image for a second of being physically aligned with Jesus. Obviously, I'm using that term in a figurative way. But if we're physically aligned with Jesus, he's out front of us. He's leading, we're following, right? So everything out in front of us then in the world, including everyone that we encounter, sees Jesus first. They see him before they see us. So stay with me. we're going to do a little exercise for the rest of this message. I want you to think about, in your own life, one important current relationship in your life, okay? Do this now. Think about one important current relationship in your life. And I'm going to let you think about that while I take a sip of water. And I'll add that I encourage you to think about a relationship where maybe you've encountered some conflict or some challenges recently, okay? All right, so you're thinking about one important current relationship in your life? Good. Picture the other person in that relationship. Maybe it's the one doing this to you right now, I don't know. And answer this question. Has there ever been a time when you or that other person regretted how a conflict between the two of you was handled? If so, would you be bold enough to raise your hand? Yeah, look at all the hands. And I know these fine folks at Bethany, you're raising a hand to say, well, Jim, you know, it wasn't me that had a problem in the conflict. It was that other person. I get that. But seriously, keep that relationship in mind, because my prayer today is that you'll do some relational heavy lifting, okay? Here we go. The first specific voice that you and I can choose to use in that relationship is a voice of humility. Is that a driving voice or an inviting voice? It's so inviting, isn't it? And so refreshing to hear. And our model for knowing how to use this voice is Jesus. Let me reset quickly here. I've said that we all have power in our voices to create hope and healing or to create hurt and harm. I've said that we still hear those lingering voices, right? I've said that voices are either driving or inviting, and I've said that the greatest inviting voice in the history of this world belonged to Jesus. And those four truths lead us to another truth that for me, honestly, has become a life-changing reminder. And if you don't remember anything else I say today, please remember this. When a voice is involved, a choice is involved. Whenever we hear a voice, or whenever we use our own voice, we first make a choice. Let me ask you one last question. What makes a voice memorable? What makes a voice memorable? A voice becomes memorable when the message that it shares is unexpected. You're nodding, yeah. That's why we vividly remember those lingering voices from our past. Because at various times in our life, some people chose to say something to us, good or bad, that we didn't expect to hear. And so we remember it. When a voice is involved, a choice is involved. So let's choose our voices for a change in our relationships with others, and for a change in our relationship with our Heavenly Father. Let's share with those around us in that relationship that you've been thinking about, voices that are unexpected, voices that do linger pleasantly in their heart and in their mind, voices that are life-changing and that are reminiscent of Jesus, the voice of truth.